I would like to take a moment before we get into today's main episode and to talk about my sponsor for the podcast. Podmatch is a new podcasting site dedicated to all podcasters. The platform helps hosts get connected with potential guests to appear on their show, as well as allow guests to find podcasts that will give them a chance to share their story. Podmatch offers many tools to help organize your page, from to-do lists to episode planning to potentially appearing on a leaderboard. Podmatch has it all. The best part, you have the potential to get paid. And who doesn't like to get paid from home? I like to. With an easy sign up, you can start connecting with podcasters and guests immediately. I have been a part of Podmatch since the beginning of May, and I have got to say that it was the best decision I've ever made because Podmatch helps your podcast grow. It helps you get connected with people that have very interesting, very compelling background stories that are just waiting for their story to be shared. So if you are a host or guest and would like to start building professional relationships, explore more opportunities, and have your story shared, I highly suggest that you sign up with Podmatch today by going to joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to start expanding your network in seconds. I would like to give another huge thank you to Podmatch for sponsoring this episode. Now on to our main episode, and again, you can sign up at joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to begin your podcasting journey today. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Lethal Venom Podcast, the show where I talk about anything I want with the honest to God truth, no lies told. Today I'm joined by Dr. Josh McConkey. He is a Pulitzer Prize nominee, a Telly Award winner, and best-selling author, as well as a nationally respected emergency physician with over 20 years of clinical experience. He used to be a former professor at Duke University. However, he does remain board certified in emergency medicine and is known for his calm leadership under pressure, whether in the ER or on the battlefield. He served 22 years of decorated military service. He currently commands the 459th Aerial Medical Station Squadron and the U.S. Air Force Reserves, where he leads critical medical readiness and deployment operations. His dual roles in medicine and military service reflect a lifelong commitment to service, leadership, and resilience. A devoted husband and father of three, he lives in North Carolina now with his wife. Together, they are on a mission to shape the next generation of American leaders through faith, mentorship, and action. His leadership ethos, Be the Way Behind the Spear, challenges today's leaders to stand in the gap for their communities and be a force for unity, character, and purpose in a divided world. So I would like to give a huge welcome to Dr. Josh. Thank you so much for coming on. It's an honor, and I cannot wait to hear your story today.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
So, if you could, feel free to tell me a little bit more about yourself and just share your background about how life has been for you.
Yeah, thank you. So, I grew up in a very small rural town. There's way more cows than people where I grew up, and it was a family of railroaders. So, my dad, my father, my grandfather, and my great grandfather were all railroaders up in around Montana, and then my dad had moved out to western Nebraska when the old Milwaukee Railroad went under, and so got on with the Burlington Northern Railroad. So I was the first McConkey to go to college, and kind of busted my tail to try to find something more than a railroad life. And went to a small school in western Nebraska, medical school at University of Nebraska in Omaha, and then joined the military. Took a direct commission after that, and found myself in Iraq in 2007. After residency, I do emergency medicine. Changed my whole life, just really put things into perspective. You see men and women dying for this country, and I carried some of those body bags on helicopters and did one air assault that was the craziest and scariest thing I have ever done. And it just kind of helped put my life in perspective. I'm very blessed right now, married with a wife and three children, and still work as an emergency physician, and just finished my military command tour. I now do emergency management for the Air Force in Washington, D.C. as part of a joint task force. And yeah, I'm living the dream every day, just happy to be alive.
I'm sharing with my listeners a little bit about your military service. And first, I want to say thank you for your service and what you did. Um, Was going into the military something that you had always wanted to do?
I loved military history growing up. For me, I grew up watching Full Metal Jacket, Platoon, Apocalypse Now. These are just some really iconic movies about the Vietnam War, and that really kind of shaped who I was. A lot of my, just personal heroes that I've looked up to were military service members. If anyone out there has watched Band of Brothers, Major Winters, who led that the 506th Easy Company. Just that type of leadership is something I've always tried to model myself after, and I always wanted to serve. So I jumped in 2000. I think it was April of 2000. It was an Army National Guard. It was supposed to be doing a bunch of medical mission trips and doing some fun stuff in Honduras and Belize, and then 9/11 occurred, in 2001, the year following. So we were at war pretty much my entire career. So yeah, it changed a lot of things for me.
What lessons have you learned about leadership from the battlefield that you apply to everyday life?
And you learn so much. You learn from bad leaders and you learn from the good ones. Hopefully you're taking more away from the good ones. With the bad ones, you're just like, oh my goodness, just don't be that guy, right? Like everybody's had a bad leader before. Sometimes you don't appreciate the really good leaders that you have until you've had a bad one, right? Everyone's had a bad boss, and you're like, oh, nobody likes this guy. Like, just don't be that guy. So, just learning lessons of accountability, taking ownership, resiliency, just being able to bounce back for some very difficult situations. It's pretty chaotic. When you make that transition from civilian life to the battlefield, it took me, I'd say it was about 2 weeks where I was kind of freaked out. I was flying medevac and they were shooting down helicopters. So they shot down 8 aircraft in a 2 week span. The day I landed there, they shot down one of our helicopters and they killed one of the flight surgeons 2 weeks before I got there. His name was Colonel Allgood. So I was quite scared. And it took me about 2 weeks to really get that battle mindset of like, listen, you're probably going to die here. So you might as well have a good time and enjoy the adrenaline rush. And then once you're okay with not dying anymore, you can really get things done. But it's a transition for sure.
I actually had a guest on recently, to share me with his experience about being in the military, and it said that it took him a while to, after he got, after he stopped serving in the war, it took him a while to stop being paranoid that even though he was back here in the States and that he had landed, he still was on guard because he thought you kind of stay in that mindset of, okay, you have to be on guard at all times, you have to be vigilant at all times, you have to be aware of everything. So he told me it took a while to kind of be calm again. So I've interviewed countless soldiers that have been in the military, and they've all said the same thing, that it takes a while for them to get that mindset out, that it stays with you, and it's something that you never truly can forget. I've told people, I said I can't imagine what our army and our military men go through every day.
Yeah,
I can't.
it's huge. So, that transition to the battle mindset is pretty easy. Do you want to live or die? But coming home is way harder. So making that transition, I know myself, as a guardsman. So, the guard to reserves, I serving in combat, and then a couple weeks later, I just plop back down like everything's fine and return to work in the emergency department. I was definitely not ready. I had a very hard time transitioning back to just civilian life for those very reasons, a lot of things that you talked about. And I actually moved to New Zealand for about a year with my wife. Now we got married in Rotorua in New Zealand on the North Island. And it just to really clear my mind and get myself back to a good headspace because you're certainly dealing with a lot. You see a lot of death and carnage, and just for all those reasons, making that transition back is always more difficult.
You actually, so when you were in the military, as a guardsman, did you have to also, it sounds like you were an emergency physician. Did you work in the emergency department for the aid when you were in the military?
Oh yeah, the battalion aid station. So this is the 332nd Air Force Theater Hospital in Balad. A big trauma facility. I did have some trauma shifts there. I was also at TMC Mustang, one of the clinics for all the flyers. and the air crews. And then I was medical director for medevac. So, that's where, all the craziness. But I flew medevac, troops in contact, picking up men and women, injured, taking bullets for this country. And that was always a little bit nerve-wracking, but one hell of an adrenaline rush. I tell you what, when you land in a landing zone called an LZ, just hopefully you land in the right spot because they set up secondary IEDs. Specifically, there's one in Bakuba. It was a little crazy because we kept going to the same place, and if you pick wrong, it's like Russian roulette, and the secondary ID takes you down. So, the one air assault that I did was probably the most scary by far.
Man, I can't imagine what you probably have witnessed in that triage area. I can only imagine what injuries that you probably saw or witnessed. It
You
might
know,
be too graphic to share, and if you don't want to share, that's completely fine. But what were some of the memories you have working in triage and some of the injuries that you witnessed having to be able to treat?
I think, just one of the stories that really kind of helps put things into perspective is the difference between, combat medicine and civilian emergency medicine. So in combat, you're just amazing individuals and they're putting their lives on the line. They're always more concerned about the other people around them. So when you take care of a guy that has, both their legs blown off, been shot several times, bleeding out, and he's conscious, you're talking with him and like, hey man, you okay? He just took an IED. And hey, my pain's like 4 or 5 out of 10. And is my junk still there? Like literally, is my penis still there? And is my buddy alive? That's all they care about. And then you come back to civilian, and that pain is just so subjective. So you'll see people with hangnails or, like a pinky injury or just something. I think a majority of people would be treat that as pretty trivial. And you try to give them that pain scale, like, hey, listen, so, you know, on the pain scale, one is this is kind of a nuisance. 10 is, you took an IED and it blew all your legs off. And like, oh, yeah, it's 15. Oh, my God. And I just wasn't ready for that. It's just a different, it's just different mindset. And I had a hard time adjusting back to civilian life. So the year away in New Zealand was very good for me.
Have you ever considered about possibly wanting to go back, or was it you had done it once? You're like, I never want to do that again.
Oh, combat? Oh, I have wife and 3 kids now. That definitely changes things for me. If, we're ever, threatened and we have, a war where America's interests or my family would be threatened, I would have no problem going back. I think there's probably a lot younger guys out there now than me. As a military commander, I was also a CCAT physician, critical care air transport. I would certainly mobilize and deploy to take care of men and women taking bullets for this country. As far as getting into combat and flying medevac missions and doing an air assault, I if I had to, I absolutely would, but probably not as a colonel. You're not going to find yourself in those kind of situations, and with a wife and 3 kids, I don't know if I'd be able to do that without really second guessing things and probably get myself killed.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about now, and I have to give solidation to people that can go into war now because of everything that's going on. If I just can't really fathom it. It's hard for someone that's never been in war, has never really had firsthand experience with any family members that I've of, of my generation that have been in the war. I've had past ancestors that fought in World War I and World War II, but they've all passed on now, and so no one in my immediate family has served in the military. So it's hard to fathom what they've gone through. But I've seen movies, and movies I don't think do it justice.
Nah, not quite. Although it does sound. So I was in down in Al Quds, or was it Diwania? I think I was down in Diwania, like more southern Iraq, when we had different medevac detachments. This was Charlie, first of the 111th. They were out of Florida and went out there for a site visit as their medical director. And we weren't there more than 10, 15 minutes when the mortar fire started raining in. and I could hear the whistling through the air, and I was like, it took several seconds for that to register, and I'm like, wow, that really sounds like incoming rocket. And then people start screaming, "It is! Get in the bunker!" I'm like, oh crap! I started running, and my feet, you just feel like they wouldn't move. Everything was like just I just couldn't get my legs moving. It just falling over myself and kind of stumble into the bunker, and then starts exploding around you. I just started with nervous laughter. There was like, "Man, you okay?" I'm like, "Damn, it sounds just like the movies. This is crazy, except it's real. There's stuff exploding around you and shrapnel, and it's a crazy feeling for sure."
So after you had served in the combat ward, or in the military, um, was it then after you came back that you decided to teach or be a professor at Duke?
Yeah, so I see you returned in 2000, came back from Iraq in 2007, overseas for a little while, Australia, New Zealand. When we moved to North Carolina, it was 2012, and I had moved out here 2011, 12. I moved out here for an opportunity with one of the special operations teams. It was a tier one team, very cool opportunity. And during that week assessment, I was honest with the board. I had newborn twins on the way. They were born shortly after that. And I had a 1-year-old son. So we went from 0 to 3 children in 19 months. And like I said, I'm more of an adrenaline junkie, but then reality just sets in. And so I was not able to capitalize on that opportunity. I put my family first, which was the right decision, clearly. And so was fortunate enough to get a position at Duke University and really enjoyed the teaching. I still do. I do teaching on the military side, and as a medical director right now, I teach some EMS, emergency medical services, like firefighters, paramedics right now. Really enjoy that, and I do miss the whole full academics of Duke University, but just the there's a lot of politics there at Duke that I'm very happy to be where I'm at right now.
When you had these students, what was their I know some probably you mentioned that you probably started in the military. What's been some of the students' reactions of hearing your military story and um how how was it like? What was the relationship like with the students when you did teach?
Just I'm very genuine. I care very much, and that they really sense that. And especially when you're teaching in a residency program where you're doing a lot of emergencies and a lot of trauma, just being very cool under pressure. I think teaching them how to operate and make decisions in very compressed time schedules and life and death decisions, but not getting too fired up about it. And I used to joke with them like, "Hey, listen, like nobody's shooting at you. There's no mortar fire coming in here. Everybody's cool. So, just assess the situation, make some good decisions, and get some good teaching moments." I think they really appreciated that, and I always had great relationships with the students. Pretty genuine guy. I think they appreciate that.
Have any of the students kept in contact with you, or do you keep in contact and know what any of the students that you have taught are doing now?
Yeah, so you stay in touch with a majority of them, a lot of them over social media, LinkedIn, Facebook is where I've kind of stayed in touch with most of them, and you'll get little messages here and there. Once they're trained, they spread all around the country, East Coast, West Coast, South, throughout North Carolina, and I've stayed in touch with a lot of them, and just get some messages here and there. It's always fun to hear.
I think it's always important to have like a relationship with your professor, especially one that's a really good one. And I can just tell from you that a lot of students admired your teaching just from hearing just a little bit of your story. And for students to be able to message you here and there, that's such a good feeling. That to me as a professor, that would be something that makes teaching fun is having students from the past be able to contact. I keep in contact with mine. Even I just graduated, I still kind of here and there have been sharing some messages here and there about what's been going on. So, eh, um, I think it's always a nice thing for professors
Oh
to
yeah. I
know what's
remember a
going
lot of
on.
my professors from residency, from medical school, college, even high school. And that's being the weight behind the spear. And so the book that I wrote about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, when I sat down and I thought about all those teachers that were so important in my development and were really the weight behind my spear. It really put things into perspective. And, being able to do that for the next generation, that's how it works. You got to pay it forward.
You know, I think it's something from different things. Most of my high school teachers, I was like, bye. That's literally how it was with most of them, and I even had professors like that too. There's a lot of good ones and bad ones out there, and it's always the good ones that I always keep in contact with. The bad ones, I'm like, bye.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'll see you later. I'm like, you're not gonna hear from me again. Um, you know, you just have like a whole multitude of accomplishments that you've done. I was reading over in your email, your kind of like bio, and you actually have been awarded stuff and been nominated for um things. You appeared on the Kim Sorrell show. You've also been an appearance on the Drive On show. And tell me how that feeling of being able to have your story shared on a more wider network and be able to have your story reach more people.
So, having experienced, the things that I saw in Iraq 2007, carrying those body bags, seeing, men and women just laying everything on the line and sacrifices like that. I feel it's my personal mission to make sure that those sacrifices were worthwhile. And so I wake up every single morning, I think about those individuals, and I'm just so thankful to be alive and have a family, my wife, three children. I have to make those sacrifices worthwhile. So that's what really motivates me. I wake up every single day and try to share those stories and that whole personal leadership ethos, be the weight behind the spear. And now it's got a lot of traction, TV, news, podcasting, with the Pulitzer Prize nomination was very cool. The Telly Award win this last year was a blessing as well. So, just the more people that I can get this message out to, the more people that realize that what they do every single day really does matter. And this next generation of Americans, they need us. We have to take ownership of that and teach them these basics of leadership and resiliency. So I'm glad, we need more of that. And I hope I can make a difference, and it's working out so far.
You're a huge advocate for mental health struggles, especially with this younger generation and or with my generation, with Gen Z and even younger than that. From your experience, do you have an idea of why anxiety, depression, and suicide are on the rise and are very severe right now?
It's a combination. I've kind of narrowed it down to really two things. So the first one is there were some very, very bad policy decisions during COVID. And, it doesn't do any good to pass blame, but what are we going to do about it? So you take an entire generation that during their most formative years, right? You shut them out of school, you shut them out of their church, you literally shut them out of their communities. And so they just were shut-ins, just living on iPads, iPhones, on social media. So those social skills just didn't develop. And then you couple that with the helicopter parenting that you see now, where these helicopter parents, maybe it was a reaction to some of the COVID policy decisions, but really it preceded that. So you look at 10, 15 years. There's a whole group of kids that everybody got participation ribbons. Everybody gets a trophy. Life is not like that. Real life, there's winners and losers. And you don't have to be a winner all the time. And there's nothing wrong with losing, but you learn from it. You have to make mistakes. That's how you build resiliency and learn. So when you take those helicopter parents and they just mow every obstacle down in their kid's path, they don't let them make mistakes. They don't learn. They don't. This generation, as a military commander, I see this. So they're anxious, they're depressed. And then as an emergency doctor, I see, unfortunately, all the suicides. There was one just this last week, 14 years old. And my son is 14, so that strikes very, very close to home. But that combination is a bad, bad combination. The social isolation, social media is not good for mental health, anyways. And then just some of the parenting techniques were just, It's a perfect storm, and now we're seeing the results with this mental health crisis, with the anxiety, the depression, and the suicide. And we've got to take ownership of that as a country. It doesn't do any good to pass blame. What are we going to do to fix the problem? In my book, Be the Weight Behind the Spear is that prescription for the problem.
Parenting nowadays is so different than what it was when I was growing up. Used to, and even school leaders did it too, but they only did it for first few years when I started kindergarten, was paddling. It was always kind of parenting to give your child a spanking, whether it was, which if I'm from the South, so you either got spanked by a fly swatter or you got spanked by a stick. Or they're like, go pick your, you go pick something off the bush, go pick your weapon was was literally what we had to do. Um, and but now it's very frowned upon that you can't hit your kids at all, that it shows that you are abusing your kids. School leaders can't do it anymore. So it changes. I've I've learned something with the helicopter parents. I've seen that majority of students that live in a strict household end up turning out to be very rebellious. That's just kind of what I've seen because they've lived in such a sheltered life to where they have to do this, and this. To where the second they turn 18, they get all this taste of freedom. They finally
Yeah,
don't have to.
everybody knows those people, those kids in college, they go absolutely bonkers. So yeah, I was raised in a pretty strict household. There's I guess I would call my household I raised my children in is strict. I don't do the physical punishment like my father did, with like belts and the wood sticks and that type of stuff. My grandma, boy, I tell you what, grandma, she would walk you out there and you could pick a lilac, or there's a lilac bush and you got to pick which of the branches you could use. And I remember at 7 years old, man, I was kind of a terror, but yeah, my grandma, whew, you didn't mess around with Grandma Nana, that is for sure. So the physical stuff I don't do in my household either, but we have a very strict household and learning some of those basics. I, try to be open and let them make some decisions. Like let them have some failures. That's how they learn. And I don't want them to go berserk nuts when they go to college like that. Everybody knows those kids. My goodness.
Yeah, I've always, I think it's good for parents to have some strictness in the household, but have a little bit more laid backness on some stuff because I've seen that students that live that have strict parents, but they're not strict on everything. They actually turn out to be more thing like if they want like a $5 pair, which $5 pair of shoes. I'm like, what am I in 1980? If they want like a pair of shoes that are like $30, I think it would be okay for them to get $30. You can't just say no every time they want a pair of shoes that are over $20 because then they get in that mindset of, oh, once I turn 18, I can buy all these shoes now. I don't have to worry about things. They're not going to know a limit. So I think I think parents nowadays need to learn that yes, you do need to be strict with kids, but you don't need to be so overly strict where when they turn 18 or even when get older, like teenage years, they don't turn rebellious and they don't do all this stuff that they wouldn't originally do if they didn't have such a strict household.
Yeah,
I just
certainly
I've
a fine
seen.
line between that authoritarianism, 'cause you do have to lay the smack down at times because they are kids, but just being open-minded, let them make those decisions. Um, that's how they learn those resiliency skills. You have to let them go out there and explore the world a little bit, and they have to make some mistakes or they're not going to learn. But yeah, don't let them make the dangerous ones.
I guess some advice for from you about this is referring back to the mental health. What can parents do to maybe help mitigate the chance of their child having to go through and live with mental health, and that if they do suffer from mental health, what steps can parents take to help their child get through that difficult time to where it doesn't lead to any more further consequences?
Yeah, so early on, like the earlier you get involved and set standards, the better. So generally, and this come from Coach K. He was the legendary Duke basketball coach. He actually came and gave a leadership lecture to our residency program several years ago. And he's big on standards, not rules. Like, people don't like rules generally. A lot of people love to break rules, but if you talk about standards, that's what we talk about in this household. Is that's not the standard that we hold ourselves to, or those actions aren't don't meet our standard that we act, in this household. So setting those standards, being a role model, because your children, they see exactly what you do and who you are. So you tell them one thing and then you do something differently yourself. I mean, they see through that. So
Mm.
just those standards and those basics, the mental health things are critically important as an emergency physician. Those aren't things that we sweep under rugs. We don't just say, "Hey, suck it up and move on." You have to address that. Um, Man, I can't tell you. I mean, I've seen a lot of suicides, and every time you sit and you talk with those families, you sit down and cry with them, and some of the parents really kind of talk more about the stories, and you remember those. And so the suicide on this last week, the 14-year-old, I came home and I talked about that with my children. We talked about the mental health issues. We talked about, not hiding that, and that, we have standards, and as disciplinarians, there's our expectations and things as parents. But then, there's the authoritarian, like this is how things are going to be done because you're a parent, because we're the parent. And then there's the, hey, we take that hat off and we care about you and we love you for exactly who you are. And you can talk to us about anything. So, we're not going to pass judgment. We're not going to, do something punitive. Like you just, things are going on, things at school, with relationships, with, keeping that open dialogue. And then, if they don't feel comfortable talking with you, give them a mental health therapist, someone that they can talk and work things through. Just pretending like it doesn't exist and not talking about it doesn't work. Okay. I promise you that. And a majority of the suicides that I've seen, when you sit down and talk with parents, boy, they wish they would have done things differently. And it's always the people left that suffer. I mean, suicide is just brutal. I've seen a lot of them. And, know what the really important thing is: everybody has a breaking point. Okay. It doesn't matter who you are, how tough you think you are. So even as medical director for Combat Search and Rescue, PJs, so special forces, these are the most mentally and physically tough individuals on planet Earth. They are just mind-boggling. I could tell you stories and you're never going to believe it, that a human being could be capable of doing those types of things. And guess what? They still have suicides in that population. So it doesn't matter how strong and tough and mentally fit you think you are. Everybody has a breaking point. Life happens, crazy things happen. So lean on that weight behind your spear, right? Everybody's got family and friends and colleagues and mentors and people throughout their life. Make sure you maintain those relationships. Don't wait until things are super, super bad before you reach out. So I guess probably the biggest takeaway.
I think one thing that our parents have struggled with when it comes to mental health is when the appropriate time is, because you don't want to introduce kids to these serious issues at such a young age. But at the same time, you see kids that are 10, 12 years old that unfortunately get diagnosed with depression, anxiety, and they even end up doing suicide. So I think parents now have a hard time of deciphering, like, well, do I mention mental health when they're 7, or do I wait till they're 14?
Yeah, hey, the earlier or better. In fact, I'm writing a book right now, a children's book series, Weight Behind the Spear series. I've turned that to a children's book where we talk about these types of things. So the first book will be coming out here shortly. I don't want to spill too many beans, but we just take those basics. And how do you talk to a 5 to 8 year old, or a 4 to 8 or 9 year old child about leadership and integrity and accountability, friendship, and then just some mental health issues as well. Like, how do we talk about that? Well, this book series is going to address that. I'm really excited about that. We've got a publisher that's picked that up, and it's never too early. Like you don't talk over their heads, but keep an open dialogue. Don't just pretend like it's not there. And
Mhm.
talking about it does not plant that in their heads. So that's one of the more common misconceptions is like, well, if I talk about depression or if I talk about suicide, now I've planted that in their heads. And it's like, no, no, that's completely false. Talk about it, discuss it. If they were thinking about suicide, I mean, trust me, you did not plant that idea in their heads. So just talking about it and keep that an open dialogue, just buttoning things up and not talking about it is the wrong thing.
Yeah, and parents, you kind of have to also say if you have kids that are like, whenever you try to talk to them, they don't listen. Honestly, they you could talk about a serious issue and they're like, and it goes right over their head. They'll be like, yeah, yeah, yeah. When are we getting ice cream? It's like that common thing. But I think he made good points. I don't think it's too early to say it, but um, I think the book that you are writing, I think that would be a huge groundbreaking book that'll help parents be like, hey, this is a good way to recommend it without being too graphic, but also getting the points across. And still after that, they'll be like, yeah, 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 when we go to the park, But I think the book that I think it's awesome that that book you're writing. I think that'll be a really helpful guide for upcoming parents and even parents that even may have older kids that don't know quite how to explain or sit down with them. So I have to give you a huge recommend applause or
Yeah.
this is
Thank you. We got to get those, got to get these resiliency skills out there and just arm them just like you would protecting them in other aspects of their life. That mental health is just as important. And so I think it's going to be very successful. I'm very excited.
I seen that interesting on here. This is like a fun fact. You actually won the North Carolina lottery, which
Yeah. That's a wild story, and people will ask on that one. Um, it was a Thursday, it was Friday morning. So, because Wednesday night I had taken my son Gabriel to gymnastics, and there's a gas station right there in the parking lot. Drove right across the parking lot, filling up with gas. You see in the window, North Carolina Cash 5 was like $1 million. I'm like, oh, that's kind of crazy. Well, I should get myself a ticket. I had bought an online ticket that night, did not win, rolled those same numbers forward on Thursday night, and then Friday got a crazy email and I thought it was a scam because it just says, "Hey, you've literally it says you've won the lottery. We need your social security number." I'm like, "Oh yeah, whatever." It's so I'm glad I didn't delete it, but I logged into the account, the computer. I did not click on the email just in case, and yeah, it was shocking. You see crazy amount of money. And I think when you understand the whole backstory to that, I mean, yeah, it was great winning the lottery, but when you know the whole story of like four or 5 years before that, I was a business owner in Texas, and there was a CEO that was just, gosh, just a nasty individual. It was embezzling money. He was writing off a sexual harassment lawsuit. There was a lawsuit involving sexual harassment type stuff, writing it off through our business, even though it was a totally separate business, and then
yeah,
siphoning money off payroll. I hired a forensic accountant and found all this other crazy stuff. He just nasty guy. I called him out on it because I was applying for a top secret security clearance on the National Security Council for EMS. I'm a fellowship disaster management guy, which is what I do now for the Air Force. And he went berserk. He offered me a bribe first. He offered me $3.4 million. I told him to shove it up his rear end, that I could not be bribed, which really pissed him off. And I know now that he's been sued at multiple different businesses and he just gives everybody money. They sign a non-disclosure agreement and walk away. But he found the one dude that would turn down $3.4 million. And then he proceeded to like bankrupt the company and got super nasty and threatened the family. We had to move to Australia for a year, and that was right during COVID. The catch was I'd filed the lawsuit to prevent him from bankrupting it, and then because COVID hit, and so all the courts were frozen, we literally couldn't even get a court date. I got the FBI involved. They didn't press charges because like the threats he made. Well, he hasn't done anything yet. I'm like, oh, you're gonna wait till he kills me first? Okay, sure, whatever.
typical.
And yeah, it just a pretty crazy situation, but I ended up losing about $5 million. I did the right thing. I just got completely screwed. And I'm okay with that because my kids saw what integrity means. And it's not even $5 million, not even $3.4 million would I compromise my integrity. And, then 3, 4 years, it was probably like 4 years later, then I won the lottery. So, I do have a very strong faith. I think God was testing me just to see how much I could deal with and not break. And he's like, okay, man, I really put you through the ringer. You still stuck to your guns there. Good for you. So here's a lottery win. So I think it's just karma coming back my way.
Most people that win the lottery, they do everything, but you decided to invest it in a good thing. You actually used the money to put back towards your book, and you put it into a nonprofit. What made you
Yeah.
to decide to focus on putting the money into the book and nonprofit as other than use it for, which I'm pretty sure you probably used whatever leftover was for your family, but what what made you want to invest a lot of it into your book and into a nonprofit?
So again, when you go back to those experiences in Iraq and seeing people that sacrificed so much, I don't care about money anymore. It doesn't motivate me. It doesn't involve in my decision matrix. I mean, I'm financially stable. I take care of my family, but I don't make decisions based on money. So that was just a gift that allowed me to get the message of the book out. And then what the impetus behind starting the nonprofit organization was Hurricane Helene. September last year destroyed Western North Carolina. Just heart-wrenching images. My wife and I love Western North Carolina. Her aunt has a house out there in Todd. Spent a lot of time around Asheville, and just seeing that just death and destruction, biblical level flooding and destruction was hard to watch. And I'm like, well, hey, I'm in a position I can actually do something. So we started the nonprofit organization. It's a ton of work. I mean, started it myself just from scratch, and we've been able to make contributions for the rebuilding efforts. We were able to partner with some great organizations out there. Samaritan's Purse is a wonderful organization. Got to meet with Edward Graham and make a contribution there. And, we're doing a lot of good things. So we're just using that money for positive things. And I'd say if you understand what motivates me, I think people understand that.
Yeah, I remember when Hurricane Helene came through, I was at Auburn, and we were on the good side, but we got a lot of wind and rain. So that was kind of, to me, the first time I ever experienced kind of a hurricane come close. Um, I just think that you're such a nice person, to have everything that's been through that's happened to you, for you to be so resilient through the whole thing. And, you've gone through the military and have spent years there. You spent years as a professor, as well as also trying to win a court case or trying to get justice for this man or serve, and it ended up backfiring. But then you never did break down, and I think a lot of people can see that. Yeah, even though some people have really crappy lives, that they always will remain on top, and that nothing should get you down and break you apart. Because I know there's been multiple instances in your life that you've shared today that easily could break somebody, and you've shown such a resilient personality. I know your kids are so proud of the work you've done. I know that they are so they just feel so empowered by you. So what can
That's the catch. Thank you very much, number one. And then that's always the catch, though, right? I mean, I grew up in a real small town, railroaded for a father, kind of growing up with that chip on your shoulder. So I've really tried to find a way to keep my kids like motivated. They're certainly not spoiled. I don't get super aggressive physically with them like my parents, like my father did. But just still raise them with a chip on their shoulders, so they're motivated to do some good things in the world. So that's probably the biggest challenge for a parent, and we're trying. We're not perfect, but we're trying.
you had mentioned the motto, and it's also the same title as your book, be the weight behind the spear. What does be the weight behind the spear mean to you?
That's my personal leadership ethos. So, working with special operations, you see the tip of the spear. Just amazing individuals that do crazy things. Every single one of them had someone in their life to give them that amazing confidence. So, teachers, coaches, volunteers, families, that's the weight behind their spear. So, without that weight behind the spear, it's nothing. So, when you see that and you see these types of individuals, everybody has something to give. So, you are the weight behind the spear in your community. What you do matters every single day. Get out there and coach, volunteer, go to the animal shelter. Maybe you don't like people. Maybe you don't want to coach a bunch of little kids. That's fine. Go to the animal shelter. Those animals can be emotional support animals for somebody. Volunteer in your church or schools around you and just get out there and make a difference. So, the more people that realize that, get out there, engage their communities, you'll make your community a better place. That's what being the weight behind the spear is all about.
Through this whole journey and through everything that you've been through, who have been some of the biggest inspirations and just some people that you're so thankful to have and have helped guide you through this through your life?
My grandparents, I had a lot of family members. My parents, my father, amazingly hard worker, just blue collar guy, and I've never once ever like seen any the integrity, the honesty. I mean, I've never seen him, gosh, bend anything. My wife is amazing. She helped me through so much getting back from Iraq. We moved to Australia, to New Zealand and then Australia, and just learning to enjoy things in life after seeing a lot of death and destruction, and now having three kids. We, I'm super blessed. I'm super happy to be alive, and that's man, I feel very lucky.
Well, I know a lot of people are going to feel so empowered by this interview. Um, if people would like to follow you and as well as keep up to date with you, especially with the upcoming projects that you have, where all can they find this? And for more importantly, where can people connect with you if they would like, if they have questions and need advice? Feel free to promote your website and social media
Yeah.
that you have.
Thank you. You can go to weightbehindthespear.com. So WEIGHT, weightbehindthespear.com. And if you add a / foundation on that, it's a capital F / foundation. That'll get you to the foundation to learn more about that. You can follow on social media. I'm on Facebook, it's joshua.mcconkey. On Instagram, it's Josh McConkey MD. And on X, it's McConkey 007.
Well, Dr. McConkey, thank you so, so much for coming on, sharing your story. It's been such an honor to have you on. I hope that people that listen to here have felt inspired by it, and they've learned something. And feel free to come back anytime.
Thank you. Hey, a great show. Thanks for the opportunity to help me spread this message.
As always, I will put all of his links in the description box below. I'll put his website and I'll put all of his social media platforms down there so it's easy access for you guys to find and that you don't have to scour the internet for it. I always try to make it easy. You can also follow me on social media, Instagram and TikTok. It's Lethal Venom Podcast on there. You can also follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Noah's Podcast. And feel free to follow the podcast wherever you stream podcasts from. I'm on all the major platforms: Spotify, Apple, Amazon, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Pandora. It's essentially everywhere you get podcasts. So feel free to follow wherever you get podcasts to get notified when new episodes come out. Thank you to all my listeners for tuning in to today's episode. I hope y'all have a great and amazing rest of your day, week, and be safe out there. Make good decisions, and I'll see you all in the next episode of Lethal Venom.